life that way.
I have a question for you, Sid, on the free range chickens. Do you find that, I know that there's like the cost benefit of all the feed that you put into the chickens and then maybe processing them. Do you find that the eggs that they lay are less expensive than what you would buy at the grocery store? Or are you finding that it's kind of similar, or are you finding it actually you save money by growing and having your own chicken farm?
At this point, with the price of eggs, definitely we're about breaking even. Prior to this big same inflation cost, it was cheaper to go to the store. But for us, seeing the bright orange, thick, creamy yolk versus the very loose, translucent yellow from the store, because they're not getting what they would get it, what turns it orange, which is the grass and all the bugs that they're getting out of nature, was worth it. So back then, when we started with chickens, it probably we were upside down a little. But now that we've got 22 chickens and they're all laying, we are trading eggs for milk. We definitely have exceeded the cost going into them at this point.
That's really cool. So you said trading eggs for milk. Did you know that you could do that beforehand, or did you, as you grow and develop this homesteading mentality, did you start to connect with other people and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you have milk, I have eggs, let's make a deal? Did you start that relationship afterwards, or did you already have that?
No, that was new. So one thing like I talk about on my channel is like building that community, and creating those relationships so that you can turn to each other if stuff really does get bad. Plus, value is, I don't know, a value is intrinsic. Like you can create value out of nothing. Like, so if my 2 dozen eggs are worth a gallon of milk to Tara, who I trade with, it's worth it. I'm going to drive 15 miles and go trade that raw Jersey milk that she milks. She has 11 children.
Oh, wow.
And they have chickens, but they don't have enough to give them their egg surplus. They go through a dozen a day. And so it works out for them. They have more milk than they can use. And it just kind of happens. She does herd sharing, which is the legal way of selling raw milk. But we just worked it out this way where we're trading value for value.
That's
And
so
raw
cool.
milk is so good. Like, I don't know if anyone else has had it. Shane, have you had it?
I have not had raw milk. Your whole life you are brainwashed into thinking, oh, that's dangerous. It's gotta be pasteurized and homogenized and buy it from the store and refrigerated. Not true. I mean, it's so many lies you've been taught our entire life, and this is definitely eye-opening.
It's probably healthier.
Yeah, I want to
raw.
find this girl's name. So much healthier. The enzymes that are in the raw milk are incredible for your gut. And the thing is, I'll have to give you guys this girl's name. I follow her on TikTok. She and I have connected. She has done a whole series on the entire revolution of how we went from farm milk coming to your door all the way through the Industrial Revolution, and when they started subsidizing the dairy industry and the blue milk epidemic that they had, and what was going wrong with the cleanliness. And that's how we're here, afraid of milk because of the mishandling of milk. And I'll
and that's also what's happening now with chickens as well. I mean, they're making these animals have to be filthy and dirty and disease ridden, and not to get into that topic and have this episode banned, shadow banned, but they're culling birds all over the United States for stupidity. I mean, ridiculousness, for false tests, and it's to create more reliance on their government, and to control our food supply. So having chickens makes a whole lot of sense. Not even if it doesn't make sense financially at first, it will in the long run.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what's been the biggest eye-opening experience for you guys moving from, smaller lots and apartments before that, like moving to the half acre and really jumping in this journey? Like, what have been the most eye-opening things, or maybe what are some of the biggest mistakes that you guys have made or learned from?
That's a super good question. So I'm a reader. And so long before we ever actually moved here and actually started down this journey, my husband and I read all that we could read. I think one of the hardest things was actually getting out and doing it and understanding and putting what you've read to understanding the signs. So for instance, like you can read all day long about chicken illnesses or chicken industry injuries, but you don't know what that is until you see it. So that was our biggest challenge was actually applying the knowledge that we had attained over the last couple of years. the biggest mistake that we ever made was because we're trial and error through what we can do on the size property, is bringing in cows. We did all the research, we talked to dairies, and they said, yeah, you'll be fine on a half acre, you just bring in hay. She refused to eat the coastal Bermuda hay that's around here at relatively cheap cost, and she would only eat imported from East Texas, the alfalfa and Timothy clover hay, which was costing me about $50 for a 50-pound bale. So I went through about $1,000 in a month's time. So it was not a good financial decision for the homestead.
Well, sounds like she was a dairy queen.
She was a dairy queen.
I want my proper hay. I can't, just
She's a
lowly
hay
hay
snob.
is no good.
So my wife keeps talking about this miniature cow, like I can't remember what it's called. She's like, oh, let's get one of those. And I'm like, no, that's just so much additional. I'm like, I just can't. But I'm like, my goal, my dream would be at least an acre, out away from town, maybe near a city with like 1,000 to 3,000 population, and be able to do barter and trade. And I would just like, I look at your front yard and behind you, and I'm like, that is so awesome. And I can tell that you can walk out your back, and your backyard is there too. I live on a hill, and so like I walk out the back, I fall 30 feet to the ground, and then I have to pick myself up and walk over to my greenhouse because I've got deer that are eating everything in my yard. I've got weird rain flow. I've got like everything here does not work towards any homesteading, and I'm totally in a community where I can't have a cow and I can't have so many different things. But I'm like, we're going to start doing quail again. I don't want to do rabbits just because they're so stinky where we live. They're too close to the house. But I want to get back kind of, man, I see what you've got behind you. And I'm like, I need to do that. I want to do that. And I think a lot of our listeners are the same way. They're like, okay, how do I do this? What do I do? Like, so for the new people, where should they start?
If there's any piece of advice that I can give is invest in raw land. We used our raw land to put to purchasing the house. So we put no money down to buy the house. We used our land's value. So the land is essentially tied into the house, which is totally fine because we're not ever moving. So start small and invest in raw land if you are able. Looking back, I wish we would have done an RV, gone even smaller on the house and then eventually built later down the road. But, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And then start small. I personally always recommend chickens. Chickens are relatively easy to care for if you get the right breeds. If you don't go with something like a Cornish game hen that, has a lot of health issues and their life is super, super fast. If you get a good heritage breed to start with, you'll learn so much about patience, how to tend to animals, look for illnesses. You'll create that relationship with animal, like you said, animal husbandry. That's where I would recommend starting, is something manageable. That's my biggest piece of advice. And if you're not in a situation where you can get land right now, do what we did when we were in an apartment. We grew tomatoes on our apartment patio in 5-gallon buckets from Lowe's that we spent $3 on. So do what you can.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's cool. So what do you find that your homestead pretty much takes care of everything you need? Do you have to go, can you grow all the things that you want or you need on your land?
So we could, this amount of land could give us 100% of our food if we just ate seasonally. Right now, it's not possible because we have reserved part of our land for our children to play in. Once they're older, this whole front yard is going to be a food forest. Like there's not even going to be a speck of grass. It's going to be all food, fruit trees. We actually just planted 6 of them. So eventually, yes, right now, I would say we're able to produce about 60 to 70% of our protein between the eggs and the meat, and then about 30 to 40% of the vegetables. So we still will have to outsource in our current situation.
That's really cool.
That's
and what was your
amazing.
original motivation? I know that you said you heard about prepping, but what was your original motivation to kind of live this lifestyle?
Honestly, it was coercion. My husband, he did it all. I met him and he had this just dream of living in the middle of nowhere with his house. And I was like in the middle of Dallas. That's when we met when I was 22, barely able to drink at that point. And I was like, no, you're never getting me out of an apartment. This is too easy. And it just kind of, he slowly started introducing me to some of his YouTube that he would watch. There's a gentleman on My Self-Reliance on YouTube. He's been building cabins. Now he's building a second cabin. And so he was watching him and I started watching it. Then I kind of stumbled on Homesteading Family. I was like, okay, I kind of like this. I'm kind of in the prepping thing. I've got my go bag. I'm an expert at prepping now, maybe, so kind of how it started.
That's kind of cool. So you're
awesome.
you're like the city girl that was turned prepper homesteader. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So does he have
I
like
grew
a
up in a rural
nice
suburban area.
Does he have like a nice
Go ahead.
drawl accent? Does it get like does he have like a country boy like drawl that kind of helped lure you to the woods, or like is he a city boy too that just turned to the mountains or turned to the
I don't know if it draws you in. I make fun of it when I hear it, when it really comes out nice and thick. But yes, he's got his drawl when he's not thinking about it.
That's awesome. We're going to have to subscribe to your YouTube channel. So for anyone that's listening in, you can go to TikTok. You can find Sid. She is Prepsteader. If you're following me already, I'm going to do a couple videos and tag her some more. But also, if you go to YouTube, you go to Standing Pine Farm or Standing Pine Homestead, and you can stay in touch, follow her videos, see what her husband's up to as well. What are your plans for the future? Obviously you've got the kids, but once you get the kids out of the way on the grass and play area, like, are you guys going to do like just complete permaculture, or what's kind of the next level on that goal?
So absolutely. So permaculture we're still teaching ourselves that skill. This land was just beat up. And so right now we're still having to go through the traditional tilling methods of loosening back up, but that's eventually the goal, is to get it to that point. Vermiculture, our goals overall is, when we think about our home, we don't care about landscaping. I don't care if my neighbors want to see flowers in a mowed lawn. I want to know that I can go outside with my children, plant strawberries, and they can have food. And we're going to learn how to change our diets. That's something we're already doing, where we're eating seasonally and not worried about eating avocados on our tacos. That's kind of our goal. As far as animals are concerned, we're trialing an area, but I think the 3 that we're going to stick with are the dairy goats, the rabbits, and the chickens. And anything that can outrun me is not welcome here. So quail, I won't be doing quail. So I'll let you keep that.
That's funny. You also have to watch out for quail because they can jump really high, and they're known to kill themselves if they're in a low area and don't realize how low that area is. They'll jump up and they're done. But yeah, I'm with you on slow animals. So quail, we're going to keep those caged once we get those. But
now, Sid, I was gonna ask you obviously probably the biggest part of your TikTok is about canning and food preservation and so forth. And to be completely honest, that's something that's somewhat foreign to me, right? Us guys, us preppers, we buy the freeze-dried food, we buy the beans and rice in bulk, we have all that kind of stuff. And we're working toward the garden, the greenhouse. I've purchased a greenhouse. I'm going to have that up before winter comes around. I've got a high tunnel that's going to go up as soon as I'm done with the living quarters. And and of course, as the guys here, we like the guns, we like the, but to get us into canning, what does that take? I mean, I've tried it, I've experimented with it, but it hasn't grabbed me and pulled me in like it has you, obviously. I mean, it's obviously a passion of yours and you're very good at it. It obviously takes a lot of practice. I have failed pretty good at the few attempts I've tried, and been very concerned about poisoning myself more than anything.
You're successful at failing? Is that what you're saying?
I'm very successful at failing at canning, but I honestly haven't tried a whole lot. I've been more focused on getting this property ready, getting things built, getting the food storage for the house, the year's supply and so forth. How do I get excited about canning? Because I don't have the garden that's producing enough for me to say, it's going to go to waste unless I preserve it.
Yeah. So the one thing that I would tell you first, like, don't be afraid of killing yourself. Yes, it is a risk, but I think that's another thing that we have been just trained to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Is canning your own food, because they talk about botulism, and botulism itself is so common, it's in everything, but the actual toxin that creates the illness that can harm you is so unbelievably rare. If as long as you're not just sticking meat in a jar and putting a lid on it, throwing it on the shelf, you're not going to kill yourself. Most likely, I